Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on when you are choosing to watch this. My name is Cheryl Mitchell, and I'm going to spend the next 20 to 25 minutes with you, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this and listen to this. So you're probably wondering, what is this about? So as a keynote speaker and as a person who is really just a living human being in life, I'm going to spend some time talking about how do we frame up our life. What's the frame in which you look through? So I want you to think about, you have a frame in your life, or in your house. You have picture frames, and what's in the picture frame? Is it a picture of you and your spouse? Is it your family? Is it your kids? Is it a farm scene? What is in that frame in your life? And what do you see? So if we have a picture frame, we have this image in the middle of this frame, and we don't look at the frame, we really look through it to see what's in the picture. So that's the theme in which I want to spend the next few minutes talking to you. And I want to back up a second and say, I'm sitting here as spring is about to launch in central Illinois. And I'm going to be very candid with you and say, I struggle with spring coming. Now, most people can't wait. Here's why. I kind of like winter. I like that it's dark and there's this pause and there's this slowness to it. At the same time, I will say, I am excited about spring, and I get excited when I see the flowers show up and the trees start to bud, and there's this energy around the land. But I struggle with coming out of winter, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. So yesterday, I was in Carbondale, and it was 30 degrees warmer than it is in central Illinois. And here's the other reason I struggle with spring. About the time we think it's coming, it doesn't come, and it's cold and windy and raining again. And so in this spring is coming, it's hopeful. I don't think there is a farmer or anyone in agriculture who doesn't get hopeful when spring comes. We plant seeds and we know they're going to grow. We have forgotten about the daffodils that are underground and now start to emerge. So it's not springtime that I'm so concerned about or want to speak about today with you in our mindset and how we frame it. It's what's coming after the spring. Now let's go back to why I sometimes don't like spring, or I struggle with that. It's not the spring, because I love it. The ground gets worked, it smells like dirt. You see really fat robins on your driveway picking up the worms after a rain. There's such joy in that, and there's hope. And we in the agriculture world really never doubt that spring is going to come. And it's going to yield something in months to come. For me, it also means that we came through winter, and now we're in spring, but we're going to go through these other seasons. And what's going to happen in the other seasons? What is winter going to be? It's that dark and light sort of place, right? Winter is dark, and you can cocoon in, and you can be warm and cozy and hide lots of things and not think about life, and then spring comes. So I say that as a background just to be very transparent with you, to say that spring sometimes is hard for me to fully embrace, to walk into. What I know, and which is what I want to talk about with you in this mindset, this framework, what do I do with that? So what frame do I see my life? And the analogy is, again, what's in a picture frame, and it takes all of the other background and it focuses it in. So I want to ask you, what do you look through in your life every day? Do you frame up your life through the lens of faith? And for me, I do. What is that faith and what is hope? And then, other ways to frame it. Could it be family? Is it your children? Is it your farm? Is it, taking the other side of it, is it a negative view? Is it the weight of the world? Because let's pause and say there's a lot of heavy in the world right now. There's a lot. There's a lot of concern. There's a lot of those things that come at us. But what do you frame it with? And if you've never thought about that, maybe sit down and take a moment to think, how do I frame it? I know it's faith for me. It's family, my children. It's positive. There's hope in it that I'm going to plant the seeds in my garden and in my flower bed, and they're going to grow. Our mind, our brain, is the most powerful organ we have. And that sets our mind. Think about it. The only reason you got up today was because your mind said you could get up today. Your mind can also tell you not to get up. So it's very powerful. And our thoughts, what we think about, is where we go. So our strongest thoughts lead us in that direction. If my strongest thoughts are negative and I'm framing up the world and everything is awful and it's never going to be better and it's very heavy and I'm a victim and all of that, that's going to affect the rest of the seasons in my life. So what is your mindset? What are you thinking about? Now again, remember, spring is easy. Spring is easy to think positively. We're getting our fields ready. We're thinking about the seeds. We're thinking about the yield. We're thinking about the lines we're going to make in the dirt. We're thinking about the positive, all of the beauty that comes with the flowers and the trees and everything blooming. But on the heels of that, what comes in the fall and the next winter? So how do you frame your life? Is it with tragedy? Is it with grief? And we all go through those pieces in our life that affect us. As a dairy farmer's daughter, I go back to the mindset and the frame in which my family raised me. My dad is 82 years old, and I will tell you, he has always been positive, no matter the difficulty, whether it was with farming or with finances or with family or his health. And there's been a positivity in that. And that has wonderfully affected him to continue in life. So I say to you, what's that framework? Now, what is it that comes at us that can affect us, that skews our frame, that gets us thinking differently than keeping it within that positive frame? What are those things? Well, if we were to open the newspaper or listen to the radio or watch TV, it's the weather, it's prices, it's pain. We've had a bad year, something with our kids. What's the transition in our farm right now? Other people around us, news, Ukraine, life's pace. We could go on and on and on and on. And what that does is over time, it adds up and it shifts us off just a little bit. And before we know it, if we're not paying attention, our mindset and our frame has shifted. And that's what we want to pay attention to. Now, I don't have all the answers in this session with you. I don't have them, and there aren't black and white answers because we're human beings and life is what it is. We can, however, and I believe this because I have lived this and worked with other people in this entity, that we can help each other stay framed up well to keep our mindset strong. So this next part, I want to give you some tools and some resources, but I want to give you another vision. Think of an old farmhouse that has old wiring. And now you've moved in and there's a short in it and there's maybe some sparks and you're thinking, okay, I have to rewire this house because otherwise it's dangerous, right? I have to rewire it. So I want you to think about this session, and when you leave, when you're done watching and you go about your spring and your summer and your fall, my call to action is, can you shift your perspective? Can we see it differently? Can we rewire some of those thoughts? Because we have them. We have thoughts that we hear over and over, and they're in our mind. I call that spinning, right? But they lead us down a path that's wearing on us. So I'm asking you to think about, how can you shift that? So I'm gonna give you a couple of tools or resources to think about as you shift your thinking. Because this is all, we've acknowledged this, we struggle, we have things that add up over time that feel negative and they wear on us. But we can choose differently. So the question is, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? Because if we continue, and you know people in life who that wears on them and their joy goes away, right? And then there's issues that come and it all just compounds. So, if you think about where we are in spring and you think about planting season, whether you are a farmer and you are a producer and you are working the land, or whether you work in credit, or whether you work in some other entity in ag business, it does circle around this. So think about what has happened recently with the ground, okay? So in the winter, you took off the crops. The land is there, it is breathing, it's resting. The nutrients are working. That's how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a pause, which is what we do in the winter also. But we are always preparing our fields and thinking ahead. So, do you drive by your field and look to see what's going on? I've seen lots and lots and lots of people tiling their field. Well, why are they doing that? Because when the heavy rains come, it doesn't flood and it provides drain off. So they're preparing by thinking ahead for tiling. I also just learned this, actually. There are lots of rocks in the fields, and they go by and they pick up the rocks, and those of us who love rocks in our landscape appreciate that. And so they're getting all the rocks out. What other debris is in the land? I think about the folks around Mattoon who had the tornado in the last couple of months, and the debris that was in those fields for miles, tin and wood and all different sorts of garbage, and they're picking that up now because they want to make a way for our planters not to be damaged as we're going through the field. So farmers are consistently preparing in advance and thinking about the land. Do we do that for our mind? What are those thoughts that keep coming that you want to clear out of the way? What's the debris and the other things that are left over that we could clear out, or we could think differently about, that would help us as we come into spring, which is always hopeful, but we head into summer and waiting for the weather to be just right on every acre of land? Or as we go into the fall and we think about harvest and what are the prices going to be, and then winter, and all that can weigh heavy. So what do we do with that? Who is the person in your life to help you dig up the rocks, to help you put tile down in your life to drain out all the negative? Who are you checking on? Who comes to mind that you say, hey, I haven't seen you for a while, or you see them and you're a little concerned? We all have to have the who's in our life. We are not meant to live this life and do all that we do alone. Isolation, which by the way is part of why I like winter, because I can isolate but that's not always good either. So who? That is a direct action you can take. As you're sitting here waiting to get rolling for spring, who can you check on? Who should you check on, and who should check on you? Who are those people that you should be sitting down with right now, having these conversations saying, I'm hopeful about spring, I'm worried about fall. So how do we do that so we can not be overwhelmed come harvest? So who? And then I say, what? What is the debris? What are the rocks? What are the pieces of tin that have come up and then you didn't even know that? Because many times we can dig up the rocks and then they keep coming back. I'm always surprised about that. So what? What are those pieces of debris that you want to look at and be planning for? Farmers are planners. They don't just wake up in spring and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. In the ag industry, we are planning out. We are cyclical. We're always thinking. But somehow, we put ourselves last in that. Somehow we think we're fine. Somehow we think that nurturing ourselves isn't as important as nurturing the land. It's actually more important. So the who and the what. Now I want to talk about why. Why is where in the winter I think about, okay, why do I think these things? And why do I do that? And why are you worried? And the thoughts that you have, are those actually the truth, or are they just nervous and you can keep spinning in them? So who are you talking to about why you're feeling the way you're feeling, or thinking the way you're thinking, or worrying about what's coming? What's the why? Because if we can look at those, then we can start to replace the worry and the concern with the positive. And maybe we can start to reframe or have a different frame that we look through in our life. Maybe it's so off course that you're not even in the frame anymore. But if we think about who, we think about what, and we think about the why, we can get recentered and say, is it faith? Is it our family? What are the thoughts that we have that pull us forward? And that's the renewing part and the rewiring. We're pulling new wire into it. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just needs a refresher. Now, one of the biggest call to action I have for you, and encouragement and homework, if I may, is gratitude. There is actual research that tells us and shows us that when we are grateful and we actually write those things down or we say them to another person, that it actually rewires our brain. It changes how our brain works. It changes the dendrites in there that give us positive feeling. There's endorphins that come with that. So you don't need to go for a 5-mile run to have those endorphins. It's gratitude. And maybe in your family, in your farming family, or whoever you're around, you have a piece of paper that writes down 3 things that you are grateful for each day. Just 3. Because that rewires that. And what that does is when you get off skewed, your frame gets skewed, you can bring that back. So this gratitude is critical if you do nothing else. My dad has spent some time in the hospital over the last many years, and we ran into this nurse one time, and she spent a lot of time in my dad's room. And I asked her once, why are you in here all the time? And her answer was, because he's positive, and other people are not. And this is what she told me separately. She said, I know, and the nurses on the floor know, who's going to get better quicker by their gratitude and their attitude. Proven to be So that's one of my calls to action, along with just paying attention. Paying attention. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? How's it all spinning? Where's the stress that just adds up that it at some point gets overwhelming? Now, there are, of course, many, many other tools and resources and so forth. But what I wanted today was just to have this candid conversation to offer you something simple, something doable, that you can take with you forward. Because as we approach spring, and in parts of southern Illinois it's happening, the trees are blooming and it's gorgeous, and in central Illinois I'm having a little struggle with the wind and the cold, but I know spring is coming. And that's not when I'm concerned. That's not when we get heavy. In fact, we can hardly wait to get outside. I mean, I bet you that I know people who just drive their planters up and down the road because it feels good. And just like the world of agriculture, we prepare our fields, we prepare our land, we're thinking ahead. We should be doing that with our minds too, because remember, our minds are the strongest, our brains are the strongest organ that we have. And we are going in the direction of our strongest thoughts. So what are we doing to prepare for the fall when the heaviness comes? Prices and crisis and drought or too much rain or all of the things that happen in agriculture, because they're going to come. But in the spring, you forget about them. You are hopeful and you know you're going to plant your crop and it's going to grow. So what are you going to do? What can we do together? Who are you reaching out to? Who's reaching out to you? What's the debris that's going to come that's going to add up after the hope of the spring wanes a little bit? And above all, sit down on purpose and write down what you're grateful for in your life. And some days it just simply may be breakfast. What are you grateful for? It's very simple, pays huge dividends, and does rewire your brain. What I wish for each of you is that your spring is beautiful and joyful, and even more importantly, that you take some of this and just pay attention. And as you go forward into summer and fall, that you remember this so that you go in better prepared and healthier for you and those around you. Again, I'm Cheryl Mitchell. My information will be available to you. Thank you, and let's go plant some crops for the world and just show that we are hopeful and that we know that agriculture matters. Thank you.